It's been a challenging year to be out in Austin, fresh arrival, not knowing anybody, but just all things are going swimmingly, and I'm grateful to say so.
Well, Austin's the place to be, man. I'm gonna come down and check it out. I've always had a unique curiosity for Austin, Texas. I've been down there a couple times, but now since it's I don't know, since Joe Rogan moved there, I
Yeah,
mean Lex Friedman is there.
yeah,
They built a big Tesla plant out there, right? And so there's a lot of people that I mean it's a good spot to be. And doesn't it have like a unique um ecosystem there or something that I was hearing about?
if you're talking about the limestone that runs under everything, therefore has kind of this underground system of water and rivers and lakes sort of a thing, it's got that. But what drew me out more than anything is the it's this just budding, growing, powerful conglomerate of humanity like nothing I've ever experienced. And I promise you, I'm not really drawn to cities like that. That's not really big city environment is not really the energy that I'm generally looking for. I liked it up in Sonoma, but there's so much going on, and I felt like I had something to contribute and something to say and something to participate in. And there is I don't know that there's any place quite like it right now in this whole country and maybe in the world.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to come check it out, man.
Yeah, I would love it. I'm only new to kind of figuring it out. I was pretty broke upon arrival. And so I was just kind of figuring it out and working a lot, but now I just am starting to feel like I'm a part of the Austin community. And that is something I haven't experienced in a while, is to be a part of something. And I don't know if you can relate, but working with dogs can often be not just isolating, but it feels like we know so much about that, and so few people know that it can be a little bit separating in that sort of way, where it's kind of our everyday and very important to us, but it also seems like so few of average Joe people are in on that information. And we feel like I felt like I was constantly in a I'm a teacher, everyone's the student sort of thing, and out here, well, I'm brand spanking new, and everyone seems to almost know each other, and I'm like, hey, I'm the new kid, let's do this.
Well, and it's also intimidating too when you go into a new spot, you don't know anybody, and don't know your way around,
That
you
was a big one.
know. But at
Yeah,
least you have the wherewithal to, have built the business before. And a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
of this
yeah.
stuff that we talk about with dogs pertains to human beings as well, right?
At the deepest level.
At the deepest level, and especially with like
Yeah.
camaraderie, building rapport,
Mhm.
trust, right? I often tell people the dog learns to trust you, trust the situations you put them in, and eventually trust themselves in this human world, right?
Yeah, yeah, but through our energy and not our words, and that is uh, arguably one of the biggest disconnects ever, because we just use our words so much for people, and energy has landed in this woo sort of a thing, where maybe the way it gets used a lot
Yeah.
provides some misunderstandings, but it's undeniable. It's the truth at the most fundamental level. And until people really grasp that your words mean nothing unless they match the energy with which you deliver them, then at least to a dog, they don't mean anything.
Right. And sometimes there's a homework, right? Don't talk to your dog for 24 hours. And if you say something with your voice, then that 24 hour starts over
Yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And
yeah, yeah. It's
I've
like the
challenged
75 hard. Yeah, yeah.
what is it?
Oh, it's
70.
like the dog version of 75 hard, that anytime that you fail on that thing, you start over again. And that thing, having people do that for 20 hours, 44 hours, they feel sad and they feel mean. But yeah, it's great, great homework.
Okay. So I've never heard of 75 hard.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
just a
So
highly disciplined exercise and food sort of an experience, but learning to cultivate discipline for 75 days and hold yourself accountable would be the gist.
this is cool, man. So 75 hard rules. If you
Hmm.
skip a day, you must start over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you miss a task, you must start over at day one.
Hmm.
Wow. Pick a diet to follow with no alcohol or cheat meals. Drink a gallon of water daily. I would say, if you're drinking that much water, definitely, have some electrolytes in there. Comes some
Yeah, yeah,
depending on your
yeah, yeah.
body, you can flush
Sure,
that out.
sure.
And that has cardiovascular
Mhm.
issues, like if we deplete our electrolytes, right?
I'm drinking water with electrolytes right now.
Complete 2 daily workouts, right? That's
Yep.
cool. That's what I need to do.
Yeah.
Read 10 pages per day of a nonfiction book.
Mhm.
Take a progress photo every day. Man, I might have to do this. Here, let's see.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get too far off track. I wanted to hear your experience with 24 hours of no talking to the dog, where we departed from.
Well, I mean, but it's also it's important to know, like that, like I like that, man. I like it, but what I like is, like, if you miss, we start over from square one.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Yeah.
times I'm telling my people, like, when we see the behavior exhibited again, we're kind of back at square one, right?
Hmm.
And especially
Hmm.
with reactivity or aggression or stuff, we're trying to bridge um, that time, right, to where the dog kind of knows a different form of what's possible, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's the same thing too when I tell my people, like, don't talk to your dog for 24 hours. And another thing I'll tell them is don't touch them too. Like, a lot of times that, like, they're over touching, over coddling, and I
Yeah.
can see the look in their face, especially my women. Like 80,
Yeah.
ninety
Yeah.
percent
Yeah.
of my clients are women, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'd let them know we're nurturers by nature, and sometimes the dog looks at that nurturing energy maybe as not as, like, kind of a sucker, right? That they
Yeah.
can get away with.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I see the look of defeat in faces of my clients, and I'm just like, easy. I'm not saying don't ever talk or touch your dog ever again, but there's a lesson here.
Sure.
And a lot of times they are calling me because the relationship with their animal has gotten off into the ditch somewhere.
Yeah. And what you just said, as far as then, there's a lot of hard rules that I give to people, like what you just said, because I'm not going to tell them. And I mean, it's a hard no, not ever for a little bit. And I'm not going to tell them that there's gray areas until they understand why. And maybe we're 2 months in and I see the relationship changing and I see they're doing it not just because Noah said so, because they see the results that they get. That only gets you so far. But once you start to see the results, I'm going to go, hey, I know I gave you a hard and fast rule. There are some times when you can deviate from it. And this is just so you can set an expectation of who we are in that relationship. And then that very same affection can be given from a standpoint of not being soft and not being seen as weak, but being, you know, this this thing. Yeah, this unit, rather than like groveling at the feet of your dog, which is contributing to a lot of those problems.
It's sending a mixed message to that animal.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
one, it's putting them on a pedestal where a lot of times these dogs don't really belong, and they don't wanna be on that pedestal. They kinda wanna
No,
be
no,
like a
no.
fly on the wall type of thing, right?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
don't
yeah.
wanna be
Sure,
the center of attention, and
sure.
it, gives them a false sense of security too that is
Yeah.
easy um, to knock down, and all this stuff, once they start to walk through the path and they trust me and they trust the
Mhm.
exercises and they follow through with the exercises,
Yeah.
they start to understand the why
Mhm,
behind the
mhm,
the lesson,
mhm. Yeah. Results
right?
are undeniable, man. They prove themselves, and once someone starts seeing that the relationship can change, and you're not saying what you're saying to be mean or to deny the dog what it wants for the sake of some personal enjoyment, rather. And some of these people with their own children, they understand these rules. They employ the same rules with their
Sometimes.
children. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not black and white, but I have seen. So let me give you an example of exactly that. That I was dealing with a timid dog that needed to be told what to do, and the woman felt that it was mean. She had 4 boys at a certain, this was early on in COVID, where we're doing masks indoors, and the kids, she put them in the garage so they could be separate from us. It reached about the hour mark, the kids wanted to come out. I'm still having a hard time getting this woman to understand that a timid dog needs, we need to be a little more clear about boundaries and what not to do. Her kid comes out of the peeks his head out of the garage and says, Mom, can we come out yet? And she's like, we're still doing it. Get back in the garage. Not doing it yet. And I'm like, you do know how to do it. You have to be stern, assertive, and not. She wasn't angry, and she wasn't volatile, and she wasn't frustrated. She just said, this is a hard no. Go back in there. I'm doing something right now. And I'm like, you already know. Why does the dog get a free pass? You know how to do it.
Why do you think the dog gets a free pass? What's your theory behind that?
Oh, it's to the deepest part of us. I always ask people, why did you get a dog? And it's because, like, well, I want this thing that loves me all the time, unconditional love, dog thing, whatever. I'm like, well, until you give it, there's a part that you're skipping out on. You give that dog what it needs, it'll give you everything that you want. But if you only take it and say, I want to extract everything positive out of a dog relationship, but I don't want to create the fundamental setup for the needs of that dog, you're not going to get it. Sometimes with the perfect golden retriever and lab, you just have this dog that is a miracle creature. It's really rare, and thank heavens for that.
Yes.
But that it comes down to why they got a dog in the first place, as a crutch, as a fluffy, living, stuffed animal. And when I tell somebody that they have to do some of these things, you know what they say? Like, well then why do I have this thing to begin with? Like, why would I get a dog if this is what it has to be? I'm like, that's not my answer. I don't have an answer for that. That you have to look within for that. Because first you have to give it what it needs, and then you can have what you want. But that dog has a nature, and you have to honor that.
It's our moral obligation to honor that. We are stewards of these animals, right? And that's where I tell people is like, look, I'm kind of like an attorney for the animal. I represent their best interest. You can let me know everything that you have gotten this dog for, what you expect out of the dog, and the problems that you want to fix. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at this animal and I'm an advocate for him. And not only that, but you have paid me. You have inquired, and it is my professional obligation, my moral obligation to give you the truth. And sometimes the truth can be brutal, but I don't want to see these dogs becoming emotional dumping grounds. Right. And it becomes a very one-sided, selfish relationship, right? Where I want to consider the dog. And that's why there's a dog trainer out there in Buffalo, New York, Tyler Muto. A lot of people know Tyler, and he has a program called Consider the Dog. And I was just like, bro, that you're a genius. And I got to reach out to him and have him back on. But check out Consider the Dog and consider the dog. Like, and that's where I come in as somebody with this knowledge base and working with thousands and thousands of dogs and seeing patterns emerge over and over and over again. And you know what? I get it, because I love my dogs too, man. You know,
I heard the little clicky clack tippy toes of your creatures.
Yeah, I got a whelping box here. Let me show you what I got.
Oh man.
Yep, here's what I got here. I need to do his nails today.
Out of here. What is that, like 4 weeks?
Yeah, just about. A little skipper key.
Yeah.
Let's see if he makes any noises here. It always sniffing the mic. But his eyes, he's starting to actually see. He's starting to actually sit up.
Yeah.
There he goes. Can you hear him? And then Mom is right here just cruising around. And that's, you know, it's cool. Like I can't tell you how much I love puppies, because as dog trainers, a lot of times, even if we get the dog right at the very beginning of the relationship, it's still 2 months old, right? And so we still have missed this huge imprinting time, foundation, right? And so every single day I'm working with this guy, and this is Mama right here, just sitting right underneath me, right? Key as well.
Little fuzzy bat.
She's such a good mom, and it's just so cool to see that switch, right? And we're nurturers by nature, like I was saying, and dogs can look at that as a sucker. And I see, like I was working with a poodle last night with a client, and the poodle whined, and the mom is boom. Like there's something, especially when women have children and go through the veil of becoming a mother.
You're saying the human owner of said poodle?
Yes, the human owner of said poodle. Yeah, I know I was talking about dogs, but yeah, thank you for help me clarify that. And I have to, you know, I see it right away, you know. And if you ever want to see, just walk around with the puppy, and you'll see the ladies just, yeah, oh, and you see their faces, but that's why it's so magical, but it's also, it's a little too much a lot of times in the human world,
Yeah.
right? Where it is over coddling and too much touch, right?
Mhm,
I tell, like, she's
mhm,
looking out the window right now. The dog's in the whelping box.
mhm,
The only time that she's really touching him is to care for him, like to clean him up if he goes to
mhm,
the bathroom,
mhm.
and to just check him out. But once she knows that he's good, then she's good too. She's not overling this dog. And I
Yeah.
tell people, watch how much mom dogs touch their pups, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when they're carrying around a lot and they're like, oh goodness, right, they start to realize um, that by doing this, we're not allowing that dog to really, really establish a firm understanding of where they're at in human world.
It's denying them a lot of really important life skills at a very early age. It's really hard to make up for later.
That's right. And it
Yeah.
is the the
Yeah.
um, the formative, right? The
Mhm, mhm,
formative
mhm,
years,
mhm,
and that's where the format is being written. And
mhm,
if we have a small format, like if we have a
mhm,
Commodore 64,
mhm,
I don't know how
mhm,
old you are, but that
mhm.
was one of the very first
Yeah,
computers,
come on, of course.
right?
Yeah, I'm
And then we
40. Mhm,
expect it to operate on a iOS
yeah,
level. It's not going to compute.
yeah.
Um, it's not going to even work. And so we need to understand during this crucial time that the formative years are the time for experiences, are the
Mhm,
time to allow that dog to
mhm,
adjust on their own.
mhm,
And if we're always there, then we become an essential part of that, which is not healthy.
mhm.
Or we need to allow and observe and see
Yeah.
how the dog does. And now, if the dog gets into overwhelm, then we can be there to maybe increase the threshold between whatever's overwhelming that dog, or provide an advocate type of positioning with our body,
Mhm,
or what we
mhm,
do,
mhm,
or maybe like shorten the duration, or there's a lot of ways that we can
mhm.
mitigate that stress response, but the stress response is going to happen.
Yeah.
um, I stressed out on the way back to home coming to talk to you.
Mhm,
It's just
mhm.
part of life, man. Like
Yeah.
you are working out, and guess what we do when we work out? We stress our body. We
Yeah.
tear our muscle tissues so that we
Yeah.
may build new muscle tissue, right? And if we're always afraid, like if a baby is crawling around and once they stand up, we're afraid that they're going to fall,
Yeah,
right?
that's the risk of standing up.
That is
Yeah.
the risk of standing up.
Yeah.
And but that breeds about stronger bones.
Yeah.
That brings about a better understanding, more mobility, um, a greater opportunity for movement and freedom as that
Mhm.
individual can exhibit, right,
Mhm.
with their physical body.
Well, let me ask you this about the puppies, because an ex and I, she and I both worked with dogs, and so that became an experience I had never had before. Where now you have two minds that understand dogs to the same level, but are gonna think about it a little bit differently. And we had ended up receiving some 3 or 4 week old puppies where we weren't sure what happened to mom, but she wasn't around anymore, and now we
Oh,
had
goodness.
these puppies, and so it started to become very clear that there was going to be a formula for desensitizing these dogs to, I think we printed out a list of maybe 50 to 60 of the most common things that dogs freak out about, from balloons to ladders to beards to hoods to sunglasses and all regular everyday things. That why not now that we start to, like, we ended up tying balloons just to the pen and to the crate that they were in. And so have you gotten to a point where it's, you're doing it so much you have a formula of desensitization, or is it more real world experiences from the standpoint of somebody who knows how to be that advocate for a dog and let them figure stuff out on your own? Have you gotten formulaic with it, or is it kind of batch to batch?
Both. Both,
Yeah.
right? Like some things I do formulaic with, like I get them a bunch of toys, and I have these little play toys, and there's these little crumbly things that they can walk across, and
Yeah.
there's lots of little stuff that they can do, but it's also we're going to encounter stuff that I never even knew
Of
about,
course.
right? And
Of
we
course.
live in a world where chaos is inevitable at any
Mhm.
turn of the any turn of the corner, right?
Hmm.
We could be out of school or at a parking lot or a park, and a school bus of children show up instantly. And I've had
Yeah.
it happen, right, where these guys were
Yeah.
playing. We were out on this field, and I didn't realize it, but they had a bunch of baseball games scheduled for that day right when we were there, and we just all of a sudden we're out there, and within the span of 20 minutes we probably had hundreds of people show up,
Mm.
right? And so it's
Yeah.
important to gauge the dog's reaction to that, and also have like a plan B just in case we do get
Sure.
into overwhelm, right? And I'm looking at
Sure.
each dog as an individual as well,
Yes.
where one dog who might be like a sibling of another dog is perfectly fine with it, where one isn't and one is fine. And so we have to work on that individual and not just lump them all into like a blanket strategy. And then but
Well,
also
didn't you assume that if that dog got scared, it must have been abused at some point, Bill?
yeah, I don't, and because I see it all the time, but people
Yeah. Some
they
dogs are
just,
just more resilient than others.
and some people just have this weird narrative going on in their head, man, where
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've heard this dog must have been abused by a man, right?
I
This
mean,
dog
more
was
than almost anything, to be honest. I hear that more than almost anything.
interesting. Let me know if you guys are trainers in the comments while you're watching this, and most people watch this after the fact.
Yeah.
And I just shared it. Let me tag you, dude, so I
Yeah.
can let me
Sure.
tag you here so I get you can share it, or
Yeah,
it's
a lot of it, there's an uncertainty. We're not sure what happened in this dog's previous life, but we're pretty sure they were abused, and we are quite certain that it was a man. And I'm like, well, let's say you have a dog that's sensitive to people. The energy of a man is different than the energy of a woman as a generalization. So a man walks in confident, I know everything, direct eye contact with the dog, maybe not nurturing by nature as much. And that, again, if we dissociate from that description being an energy in and of itself, well, then we're not going to make the connection. But like, I've had my last two partners, I'm like, they are so compassionate by their nature. I have to try really hard to even come close to that level of compassion. And that's
mm,
a huge difference between men and women, generally speaking, that I see the love or the compassion oozing out of these women, where I'm like, boy, I have to really be present and thoughtful to not be a bit much for some of these dogs sometimes. And it's a great practice, but that yeah, a man energy is just different for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Although the male brain is 10% larger than a female brain, it does not impact
Mhm.
intelligence despite the size difference. Men and brains are more alike than different, but there are differences between the brains. And even like, just like you were saying, like when the male brain is the communications start to form in our brains, the male brain is basically bathed in a testosterone. Like there's a surge of testosterone that almost inhibits a lot of times that communication
Yeah.
network, and where we have kind of a dirt road, where women sometimes have like an 8-lane highway, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're like, I look at my text messages and it's like, yeah, sure, got it. It's just like it's we're very
Yeah. Yeah.
some of my clients and some of my women, like I am really really going through, and like I do a recap of the training, and I actually have to write another one right after we're done here for the appointment I had last night.
Yeah.
But I really really get down into the communication and write it all out, and really really think about every segment of that training time that we had, and
Yeah.
so I can reiterate and help communicate. And a lot of times too, like men, especially in relationships, I actually went to this seminar where they talk about the differences between men and women's brains, and men tend to want to solve things right away.
Gets us into trouble sometimes.
You better believe it. And I didn't realize this until I went to the seminar, right?
Yeah.
And so when my wife comes up to me and wants to talk about something, she's not always looking for a solution. She just wants to be heard and wants to communicate with her husband.
It's a really important thing to notice and skill to have, is just to receive and say, yeah,
And
yeah,
repeat back to them what they
yeah,
said. And that
yeah,
was so hard for me, man. Like, I
yeah,
had to bite my tongue and be like, "Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Have you tried
yeah.
this?" Right? And just trying to
Yeah,
solve it.
young children need that. Young children need that as well. They want to explain the problem, and yes, sometimes they need some help with it, and sometimes the best thing you can do is digest it, say it back to them, and let them know that an adult has heard and understood them. And I didn't get a lot of that as a child, and when I look back at it, I'm like, that would have been nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it just makes you
yeah,
your worth, I mean, that much greater, right?
yeah,
Because now you're being heard.
yeah.
And then this is where we find, like, if we don't get this as children, that sometimes this might lead to trauma that we uncover as adults in different relationship situations.
Yeah, the trauma of the undone, the emotional needs not met. Yeah, I'm a sensitive guy, and so there's a lot of things that I wouldn't see as acute trauma of one harsh experience, rather the lack of certain fundamental emotional needs being met for so long that as a child you just, whether it's stuff it down or find another way, that
Mm,
now as a 40-year-old man I'm like, well, that has to be addressed. And the things that once served me, and you could argue, I don't know, it would be saved my life, but saved my sanity at such a young age. At a certain point, they hold you back, and it is incumbent upon you to go. Time to dive back in.
yeah.
Time to go. Yeah, re-explore.
Well, and integrate this stuff and
Mm-hmm,
realize, hey, man, this is why I have a hard time feeling my own self-worth.
mm-hmm,
Right? This is why I feel the need to always be intoxicated
mm-hmm,
because when I don't feel my own self-worth, I don't feel good. And sometimes I like there's substances out there that can mask that, that can make us feel differently. And then it is just a process of realizing that. And then we start to see the overusages in life. And then that becomes a problem a lot of times
yeah,
physically, like our health or different things suffer.
mm-hmm,
And what I've learned from the communication between men and women is that it's very important. What I did was I actually went up to this lady that was giving a seminar, and I was talking to her. It's like, how could I be a more effective communicator with my wife? And first off, she said, just repeat the backs of the stuff that she said. And so I tried it on the way home from the airport, where she was just talking about it, and I just repeated back to her, and it was like we released the floodgates, and she just started talking to me, and I just kind of and we had a wonderful conversation. But there's also times too where she does want to rely on my ability to
yeah,
problem solve too, and so I've
yeah, yeah, yeah.
learned, like, when my wife starts to discuss, I say to her, would you like me to be a friend here, or your husband? Like, which one do you want
Yeah,
here? And sometimes she's like, I
yeah,
just need a friend to somebody listen to.
yeah,
Or she's like, no, I'm looking for, how do we solve this? How do we get to the bottom? And so that's important as well. But going back to where validation and with children, and how just kind of going through life, we start to see these things kind of creeping in. And then a lot of times with the overusages, like I was saying, that might be the obvious part of, like, I'm kind of in trouble here, right? I am reliant on the substance, and I don't feel normal if I don't have it in my system, and that's not natural because this substance didn't. I wasn't born with this substance. I went out in my environment and I found this, and
yeah.
I'm intaking it, right, and
Mm-hmm.
including it within my experience, and now
Yeah,
it's become an overusage,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And a lot of these things are addictions, and these addictions are stemmed from the inability to find that worth as a child growing up.
I couldn't relate with much more in this world any more than this particular conversation. Yeah, yeah, it's a tough one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's also something that I think that we need to talk about it, especially men, talking to each other.
yeah,
I think that we have kind of a machismo attitude, and it's looked at as a weakness when we ask for help.
Yeah.
Or
I agree with you, but less
okay.
and less these days. Like I certainly I don't disagree. I'm saying that while that is all true and it always has been, that something about our lifestyles right now, and whether it's because we're coming to a point of necessity or even a point of cultural ease where it's being allowed to be addressed because the circumstances of our lifestyles is affording that luxury, because we're not in times of you could say constant war because we've always been in one, but it's not so demanding on the culture that we need the more deep seated masculine thing where you shut your mouth and you get to work and I don't care about your feelings, etc. That was a necessity for a really long time. And as it
Mhm.
becomes less of a necessity, it gives us the space to say, hey, I got feelings too, and if I don't address them, then I think Bill Burr said it quite poignantly once. She's like, "Yeah, one day you just walk by a picture of your family and you just punch it, and you're like, oh shit, I think I've got some stuff I need to address." And yeah, it is important because as a cliche, we know that it comes out in other ways, sure, but once you feel the way it came out for you and you felt that ugliness and the shame and the disappointment, it's like, well, I don't want to scare those around me. I don't want to um,
Scare
have
myself.
have that pain resting within me. Sure, then we do, and even though you there is still a proneness to be mocked and made fun of for feelings for whatever reason,
Mhm.
as dudes do. I don't think there's ever been a time where it's been more okay, and I am launching myself into that space because none of that is a problem for me to share. It doesn't bother me at all. I spent too much time hiding from it, running from it, and being vulnerable. People often tell me how courageous it is to share stories like that, and I'm like, it's one of those things where I appreciate the sentiment. It doesn't feel courageous, it feels necessary, and it feels like if I can, then I will. And sometimes a man just needs someone to get a foot in that door and show them that it's okay to talk about this stuff, to cry, to give a man another hug that isn't just a tick, 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 and you move away, and like to share um, emotional expression with another dude. That's been a part of this whole new iteration of myself. And out here in Austin, it's been received more openly than I'm used to, and that feels like a really special place for me because it's a necessity right now in our culture for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially during the last, like we've been separated so much during the last few years with the pandemic, it is a time of coming together,
Yeah,
um, and also just being thankful of like who do we have in our lives, who do we resonate with, right?
yeah. hmm
And that's
Well,
where. Oh, go ahead.
the resonating with that is a side of creativity that I never much took into account before reading The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. That especially this applies to dog training and what I'm about to say as far as emotions go. That when people come out with dog training, they're like, "I'm revolutionizing everything. I'm changing the game." We already Everyone already knows everything, but if you have a way to get across information that we all know as a collective, but your take on it might be a little more digestible, that's something that we're looking for. And so there's not going to be anything that I'm going to explain as a dog trainer, or even in the emotional space, that's going to be necessarily some revolution, one in a million thought that no one's ever come up with. Most of it is just reminding you of shit we already know. But if I can share it in a way that it makes more sense to you than the way you've heard it in the past, as a dog trainer, that is my role and my responsibility. As a human being, it's a skill and an asset that I've always had. And in the creative realm, I didn't know that that was creativity. And you could argue it's almost at the heart of it, to taking a known set of information and then setting it back out in a way that has Bill Church written all over it, in a way that has me all over it. And I took it and I was like, well, yeah. And then I sent it back out in the world with a little bit of a different flavor that people are like, well, now I understand that concept better. And so I used it a lot in dogs. It's a skill that I've always had. But now that I'm doing way more in the creative realm, I had no idea how meaningful of a real world skill that is to take a known set of understood things and send it out in a way that people understand a little easier. And so I've been doing that with, I mean, my emotional experiences and addiction experiences, and my experience as a man that I'm not opposed to sharing. And I had no idea how much that impacts the people around me. It's been really, really special, man.
Well, and those are like what is his name? Rick Rubin.
Rick
That's what
Rubin.
we're talking about. And I just put up a post to his book, The Creative Act,
Yeah.
Way of Being. And what he says is that those who do not engage in the traditional arts might be wary of calling themselves artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the very first page. They might conceive creativity as something extraordinary or beyond their capabilities.
Yeah.
A calling for a special few who are born with these gifts. But fortunately, this is not the case. Creativity is not a rare ability. It is not difficult to access. Creativity is a fundamental aspect of being human in our birthright, and it's for every single one of us. Creativity doesn't exclusively relate to making art.
Yeah.
We all engage in this act on a daily basis,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And create is just to bring something into existence that wasn't there before.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that's what we're doing as we go through. It's the way the word snowflake gets thrown around these days. It's unfortunate that it has a pejorative connotation now, but like you and I, me and other people, we're all more alike than we are different. But those differences, the thing, like even if you and I thought about a lot of things the same way, well, my genetics, my biology, and the way that I was raised and my experiences, that's what makes me fundamentally different. And that means that we have some things that we can bring to the table that nobody else can. And if we don't bring those things forth, we are not just limiting ourselves, the individual, but there might be something that I need to share with the world and anybody, any individual, that if you don't do it, not only does it not allow you to flourish maximally, but there's information that you might share that can help other people and you don't really even know until it's out there. And then that difference that is between myself and others, again, we could be 99% the same for all I know. But that 1%, like I want to make sure that I'm able to use that, I would say, to my advantage, but it's to express it in a way that it could help somebody else. Because like you said, we're at this time of the necessity of unity and community and almost reintegration of humanity amongst itself, because the last 4 years, 3 years, were so divisive. But yeah, doing things in a creative way, or doing your creative duty, if you want to say, is really important, because you have no idea how much you're affecting others. And I've learned that years after I've gone through life in such a way, and people have come to me to say, hey, the way you did this 2 decades ago, it still sits with me. And I'm like, oh, it's nice to hear sometimes. I had no idea.
Well, and I encourage people, if you have somebody that has changed your life in a way, let them know. Let them know. Sometimes, man, that's all they need to keep that fire going. I remember I was so burnt out, man. I was so burnt out with these dogs and working and training, and I got a phone call one morning from Winston's dad and Winston's mom. And dude, I don't even remember, Noah. I really don't remember this dog too much, and that breaks my heart a little bit. But I've worked with so many of these dogs.
Yeah.
And they called me up and they're like, "Is this Bow Wow Bill?" I said, "Yes, it is." And they said, "Hey, I just wanted to call and let you know something." And I'm like, "What's up?" And they were like, 8 years ago, we brought a dog to you named Winston. And you helped us with this dog. But what you didn't know is that we had an appointment to euthanize this dog because we've been through so many trainers before. And they said, Winston just passed away on his own, and we are so grateful for you and the knowledge that you instilled in us to allow us to live a long time with this dog. And just, I wanted to say thank you. And that means the world to me, man. And I'll always remember that. And that reinvigorated me. And I just, well, thank you, Winston. Even
Yeah,
though I
yeah,
kind of think I know who he is. I think he's a pity mastiff lab
yeah,
mix, but I'm not 100% right. And so I was just so taken
yeah,
back by that I'll
yeah,
always remember that. So if you have somebody in your life that has made a difference, please let them know. Reach out to them as soon as you hear this. Even put this on pause right now.
yeah, yeah.
And then once you contact
Please.
them, reach out to them, write them a little letter, and just let them know how they have affected change in your life. And know
That
that,
matters a lot. Yeah,
well, and the truth is out there. Like the way that we train dogs, there's just a way that is just very matter of fact. But we all have a different way of putting things. We all have a better or a different understanding. We all speak differently, tonations of our voices,
mm,
and just remember that
mm,
even though you have learned from somebody else that you have a way of putting your own signature on that information. And
yeah,
I encourage you to do that. And
mhm,
just like we were talking about with Rick Rubin's book, and people that don't know him, he's a founder of Def Jam Records. He worked for Columbia Records as well. And so some of the most brilliant musicians, he's worked with. And so he definitely has a track record to prove that he knows what he's talking about when it comes to creative people. And even though we talked about it doesn't have to be an artist, every single one of us can be creative. In fact, we're being creative right now with the conversation that we're having, right?
mhm.
Um,
The choices of this doing and the saying, and the not doing and the not saying. That's
yes,
creativity. Yeah,
right. And then writing down, I
yeah,
have little notes here that if I
yeah,
don't say it, then I'll come back to it.
yeah. Me too.
Um, but it's also the fact of like that little note, like the um a rearrangement of furniture could be a creative, driving a new route that you've
Yeah,
never been,
mhm,
right.
mhm,
It doesn't have to be witnessed, it doesn't have to be recorded or sold or whatever, right. It's
yeah.
something that is just our ordinary state of being,
It's
and
fundamental.
it's
Mhm,
fundamental, and it's
yeah,
our experience of reality.
hmm
And it composes the world that we know now, right. and
yeah,
that's and that's in each moment. And so
yeah,
we perceive, we filter,
mhm,
we collect data, curate, we do it all. And that's where, like, with social media, it can be a little bit too much in some
yeah,
aspects, right. And that's why I like doing
yeah,
these live streams where they're unedited, uncut,
yeah,
and we kind of trudge through any topics, or sometimes we
yeah,
skip and run and dance over these topics or in these topics. But it's important to know that we are all creators.
yeah,
um and
yeah,
regardless, I mean, we come from a creator, right.
yeah,
Something
yeah.
created us. And
hmm
so logically, if we think about that, then that would make us, if we come from a creator, that would make us little creators, right.
Yeah. There
And
we
so
are out
I
there
think,
doing it. And so on that note, to stick with that, like I do this and have for a while, let it slide for a bit, but I'm doing it now again, my Saturday morning group community dog walk, and I do it with another trainer. And he trained at Michael Ellis School out in Santa Rosa, California, and I've been doing it for a lot longer than him, but he went through a very intensive understanding of things. And so we're mostly sharing the same information all the time. But the way he gets his point across and the way I get my point across might be a little bit different. Or it might be that the second person is reiterating the point that the first person made. And so if you and I went out to go help the same person and somebody got some better results after your conversation with them than with mine, then it would be like, well, does that make one better than the other? It's like, well, we both tried to drive the same point home, but you did it in such a way that it landed more than I did. I'm like, all right, well, maybe for that person, or maybe I'll adjust it differently in the future. But working right alongside a second trainer and watching him and myself as well get the same point across in just a slightly different way, it really, really helps people to reiterate it. But also, just that difference between the way I said it versus the way he did is really like it might really land a little better for somebody than the way someone else said it, and that's been really cool to watch in the dog space.
well, even with me as a professional, like, I just watched that Joe Rogan with the physicist, I can't remember his name, but he was talking about how dogs have no concept of tomorrow. And I'm just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
wow,
yeah.
you
I
know?
listened. I listened to that. They could train a chimp to do to understand the concept of holding something off for tomorrow, and there's not anything you're gonna do to drive that point home to a dog. Not a chance.
And so I borrowed that now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm just like,
Hmm.
whoa, that's good. That made me think of this a little bit differently,
Yeah,
right? And anytime that
yeah.
we start to think of something differently, then we are actively engaging our neural network, and we
Hmm.
are actually actively creating a new neural
Hmm.
network as
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't understand tomorrow, man. They don't understand 5 minutes from now. They don't understand 5 minutes ago. And I say that all the time with people when they want to rub their dog's nose and shit in the house. I'm like, hey, that's your fault, the human. Why didn't you just let your dog out, man? But like, if you don't let them know the very moment that they were doing something that you didn't like, if you the tenth of a second leading right up to it, you no longer have an opportunity to teach that dog what you like and don't like. That's not how it works for them. If I said something offensive to you, you could tell me a month from now. You'd be like, Noah, when we were chatting, you said that thing about my family and I didn't like it. I'd be like, oh, Bill, I will. I have learned, I will change it, and I am sorry, and I will never do it again. You don't get that chance with a dog. It's now or never, both for positive and for discipline. That if you did a good job, I can let you know right when it happened. Obviously, there's little things that we can do to extend it a small amount. But if you don't let them know that they are making a mistake now or they're doing something good now, no, you no longer have a chance to address that. And boy, does that command a level of presence that a lot of people don't really use day to day.
Well, a lot of times we live tomorrow. We live in the future, right? And that's where Eckhart Tolle, The Power of
Yeah,
Now, where he
no
starts
doubt.
to be like, look, man, doubts, fears, they're in the future because we
Hmm.
have to project ourselves in the future to kind of be like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, I don't know about that. I'm anxious about," and then regret, guilt, and
Hmm.
sadness lie in the past,
Hmm. Yeah,
right?
it's a blessing and a curse to have to have those abilities for sure. Hmm.
But we can time travel in our mind,
Hmm.
right? It's just that some
Hmm.
people have set up camp in the future instead of really, really looking at the now. And when we start to look at the now, then the majesty of this moment starts to unfold in front of us, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
When people are living in the future like that, I do spend. I fail as much as anyone or struggle as much as anyone with being present, but I do spend a lot of time very present. And that person that is way ahead of themselves, like when you interact with them, it is not, it is so unbelievably noticeable that they are not having a this and that right now. It's like whether they're looking at their phone or they're just going, uh-huh, oh cool, that's crazy, right? And all those things that people be saying that show that they're not present. For someone who spends a lot of time in presence, I'm like, hey, i'm not I'm not interested in just saying noises at you. Like, if this is not a back and forth, we can just move on and go do something else. But if we're gonna have an exchange, just be with me, man. Let's have a conversation. And if not, I don't need to just say noises at somebody's, head as they look at their phone. But yeah, being present is such a meaningful thing to come back to as a person. But if you're interacting with your dog, that's all they ever want, man, is to be with you and not when you're on a walk, be on your phone and have that new Instagram leash where it attaches to your belt so you could not acknowledge them at all on a walk and you could have a real sure footing when they try to pull you over. Like, no, no, all they want is to be present with you, and you can be 2 feet away from your dog and you are not together. They notice that immediately, that when you're not with them, they're like, well, then I'm doing whatever because this person is just trying to keep me from doing what I want. I'll just yank them wherever I feel like. And that people don't understand that you can be 2 feet away from somebody or your dog and not be with them, physically with them, but not psychologically, spiritually, not emotionally. You're just two
checked out.
people like, well, like that. Oh my gosh, it was such a meaningful. I don't. It's been years now. It was a Burning Man art of the children sculpture facing the opposite
Yeah, yeah.
direction with
I was at that
inside.
burn. I
Oh
saw it in person,
man.
yeah.
Oh God, how poignant was that little bit of artwork that we could all relate with.
I'll pull it up here.
Ooh,
because it
Man,
has two people
that
facing.
hit.
They're sitting down and they're facing each other, and they got their heads down like this, and
They're facing
inside,
opposite. Are facing opposite
yes, it's
directions. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually called the inner child, right? And there are prints of this, but what's cool about it too is not just, I mean, they lit it up. Here, let me see if I can find a good image of this.
Man, that was
Right,
a real big one.
real profound. Here, let's do one
Whew.
here. So let's see here. I'll just share this so you guys can see what we're talking about here. And I definitely, have you ever been to Burning Man, Noah?
I have not. It's definitely high on my list, but
You
never
need to
never
go,
been.
bro. So here's the
Yeah.
one at dusk, right? And so we have the
Oh
adults that are
man.
facing away, but their inner childs are engaged and wanting to play. And so it just shows us, and then at nighttime they lit it up.
Dude, I have not seen the lit up one. That's great.
Yeah, and then lit up I think the importance. And when we start to look at that inner child, here, let's see what this says. This sculpture is the most powerful piece of art. Burning Man, the sculpture of two adults after a disagreement sitting with their backs to each
Whew.
other, yet the inner child, both of them, simply wants to connect. Age has taught us much, but what we can't let go is ego, hatred, and grudges. That prevents us from forgiving and moving ahead. The free spirit is exhibited by children, is our nature. And we're
Ooh.
taught that is silly, right? We could be an adult, forget about this stuff. That one's really cool. And you can see this is a person down here, so you guys can see how like these, that's what's so cool about Burning Man. It's just, if you go to Burning
Yeah.
Man, just go for the art.
Yeah.
Like I've been
My
there
gosh.
multiple times, and I'll definitely go again. Let me know when you want to go, man, because I'll
Yeah.
definitely love to experience that with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also a rad what they call uh, like a very, you have to be very reliant on yourself,
Yeah.
because the it's acrid environment. The dirt is very acidic, very fine particles. You have to wear
Mhm.
face masks all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
Um, but the art is larger than life, and
Mm.
then we burn it all down.
Mhm.
And that's what people don't get. And I didn't get it until I was there. And when I was there and I felt the heat of the fire, and just saw these massive structures just burning down,
Mm.
I was like, wow, I get it. It's in the moment, just like what we were talking about. It's like
Yeah, man.
we're reading about this in the past, right? But if you're
Yeah.
in the moment, it really, really affects you in a way. And they used to call it like a happening or something back in the 60s, right? But it's kind of like a modern day happening. And I'll show you some of the, like, I want to show you some of the fires that they have, where Burning Man sculptures are burning down, and they burn it all down, including the temple.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I can't even
We have a hard time surrendering and starting over, and that's a really a really momentous representation of it right there.
do a temple burn it, and I hope I don't cry, man, because this is like, it's so profound.
Yeah.
Like, let me show you some of the temples that we built during Burning Man, okay? And then I'm going
Yeah.
to show you these temples being burnt down, okay? Because
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what it's about.
Yeah.
And and not only that, but not getting lost in material possessions, man.
Yeah.
Like, none of this stuff.
Yeah.
Look at all these temples throughout the years. This
And
one,
they all
I
go
was this
down.
I went to this one,
Yeah.
and yeah, I went to this one here, right? And so now let's look at these temples burning.
Oh man, it's so transformational. Wow. Wow. Wow.
Whew.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, and what you do is you go in,
Yeah.
and you leave tributes,
Yeah.
to, my good friend Maya passed away, and here's the
Mm.
people, and we sit and watch, and we're holding
Yeah.
each other, and we're crying, and especially
Yeah.
with the temple burn, the Burning Man. And this is that silence that people face during Burning Man, where the most powerful part is the temple burn, and that's the very last night. So Saturday we burn the man, right?
Yeah.
And that's an effigy of it's like a hand fasting ceremony where I mean, not hand fasting, but where it's you basically burn the bad, and
Yeah.
you get a ready for a new, right? And it's like
Yeah.
ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Here we go again. Like
Yeah.
it's a
I had a little
renewal
personal burn
process.
ritual last week.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's great.
Super
Like even
valuable.
like writing down prayers, writing down wishes, and then taking and burning them, is a part of the ritualistic kind of nature of this. But it's the people think that it's just a big party, which it is.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I don't like I'm sober, and it's not really I mean, I have a good time, but I really, really love that art. And it's not that
Yeah.
I'm an addict. I just choose to be sober,
Yeah.
and that's one thing that I saw. There was a lot of inebriation, a lot of it
Yeah. Yeah.
where
Sure.
like you want to connect and stuff, and you're like, whoa, this is this is pretty intense. Every drug, everything that
Yeah.
you can, and it is kind of a choose your own adventure,
Of
right?
course. Of
And
course.
yeah, and it's something that I highly recommend for people. And I also recommend going, man. Like I recommend
Yeah.
it to all my clients, and they're
Yeah.
just like, but if you go, like don't splurge, man. Get yourself an RV and get yourself comfortable, and
Yeah.
just know that you got to wash all that stuff because of the acrid nature of that environment. But I don't think that we could have it anywhere else than that place. The self-reliance, and
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
symbolic. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all a part of it.
yes, and then
And
the
the
weather,
sacrifice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sacrifice, and not only that, but people don't know this. There's no money exchanged on the playa.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
playa is the place that it
Hmm.
is, right? That's the
Hmm.
desert that we call it,
Yeah.
and so it's a gift economy,
Yeah.
right? And so we give out gifts, and it's so cool, man. Check out
Yeah.
Burning Man, you guys. But
Yeah.
we were talking about
Yeah.
that inner child, and I want to get back to, that
Hmm.
innocence that lies within each one of us. And as we get older, we have experiences that might lead to regret and guilt and sadness. But to remember that inside, truly, that we want to feel heard, we want to be connected.
Yeah.
um, and especially as men, I think that it's important that we get together and be honest and be vulnerable. And even
Yeah.
if we aren't um, aren't as emotional,
Mhm.
right? I think that there are benefits to feeling that emotion and being in a
Yeah.
space where you feel comfortable expressing that emotion. And sometimes that requires a professional. At least for me, it did.
Yeah. Well, what bringing together quite a few of the things that we just talked about, including some Burning Man-esque sort of energy. So, there's somewhere between a comedy bit and a character that I've been working on, and it's based on a friend of mine. We were up in the Eastern Sierras at June Lake, and it was my first time, and it was, I mean, stunning in a way that words fall so short, but he had done it multiple times a year for his entire life. And so I'm there, beginner's mindset, whatever it is, everything's new, everything's huge. And I kept asking him about, well, what's over here, what's over there? And just by habit, not really thinking about it, he became this character of like, and it's total dude energy. I already know. Oh, that over there? I already know. Oh, there's a fish over there jumping out of the water, blue skies. Seen it. Mountain? I already know. And it just became this stupid little thing that, like, he realized he had locked into the knowing everything about this place that for me being there for the first time, I'm just in wonder and amazement. Now, on our last night, we took some LSD, and that opens a certain spaciousness into your consciousness that with no choice of your own, you're going to be brought back to this fundamental childlike nature where everything just seems so big and
Mhm.
beautiful. And I always come back to the phrase awe and fascination. So much awe and fascination. And now, the day before, where he already knew everything, I already know. Now we're walking around this, and like I see him looking around at the mountains and the river, and like
The
not even
clouds,
being
dude.
not
The
even being able to
clouds.
deal with, yeah, yeah, absolutely. It almost feels like kids are in a constant psychedelic state. You see them looking around, they're just like, look at how huge everything is, and it's all new, and it became new and huge again for him. And so for me, it was just like, it was already awesome, look how much more awesome it could be. For him, he was like, man, I didn't realize how much I already convinced myself I know everything there is to know over here, who cares. And to see that awe and fascination brought back to him again, and feel like a child, and feel it being new again, and take pleasure and joy and comfort in those mountains and in those trees and in those clouds and that fish over there, and even the mosquito. Maybe you're like watching it suck your blood, and you're like, look at that thing just getting after it and doing its thing. That, yeah, it was really, really powerful. So imagining doing that on a stage or in an environment like Burning Man, where that's kind of the energy and the intention that it's being aimed at, it sounds, I mean, as powerful as anything that I could ever hope to imagine. And whether you choose to be sober or not in an environment like that, getting a bunch of people together with a similar intention, that's one thing that I feel like we really lose out on in today's everyone's kind of an individual culture, is we don't know or have as tight of a relationship with it, what it's like to be a magnificent collective of people, that we've splintered in a way that I don't really know how to bring it back. So I'm just kind of being one sort of a thing that can affect anybody close to me, and that whole like it starts with me sort of thing. But I do feel a big draw of bringing people in to things, and not so much in the look at me sort of a way, which I might have felt when I was 20, but in like a, hey, look at us, man, look at us just out there making the best of a difficult challenge that is being a human in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, and here I'm posting up a book too, Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, includes heaven and hell. That's what,
Yeah.
and Aldous Huxley, these guys were
Mm,
the fundamental, cosmonaut, or the
mm,
psychonauts, as we call them,
mhm,
right? And
mhm. Yeah.
I remember him saying that our psychedelics don't add anything to our mind. They kind of allow us to see what was already there, right? They
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
remove
absolutely.
some of these filters,
Mhm,
and just
mhm,
like you were saying with your friend, that this can be something that is just an eye-opening experience. But it's
mm,
also important because it shows us sometimes empathy, and shows us how we can look through another person's eyes, and actually
mhm.
put ourselves in another person's perception in a way, or at least start to consider that, right?
Yeah.
And there's also, I mean, there's also overusage of these psychedelics that can happen,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
and it's not all fun and games. Sometimes
mhm,
it can sting you, if it's set and setting and
mhm.
preparation. But it's also a three-part process, I believe. I think that it is, the preparation, the experience, and then the processing afterwards,
Yeah, the
right?
integration. Mhm,
Integration, as we were saying about integrating our childhood traumas as well.
mhm, mhm.
And Aldous Huxley, one of his favorite quotes out of this book is, to see ourselves as others see us is a most solitary gift. Hardly less important is the capacity to see others as they see themselves.
Mhm,
Right. And so it kind of gives
mhm.
us a different perspective, not just on others, but also on our own self. And
Yeah.
I remember one time at Burning Man that I was like, oh my gosh, I responded to that in a totally different way than, like, I was an asshole. I need to, like, it was something that it
Mm,
was, it kind of
mhm,
gave me that realization that I could have responded a little bit differently. And
mhm,
not only that, but it's also not just LSD, but we have psilocybin, we have N,N-dimethyltryptamine. Actually,
mhm,
I have these books right here from my last talk. So let's go
mhm.
ahead. Like, so we have Rick Strassman, right? And I've
Yeah,
actually met and spoken with him about the DMT
yeah,
spirit molecule.
yeah.
And these are all things that are created in our own brain, right?
Mhm.
And how do they make illegal something that we make in our own brain,
Yes,
right?
I am drugs. Yeah.
I am drugs, right?
Oh,
Not
so
like,
Salvador Dali?
Yes. That
Yeah.
is it. I mean, when we look at
Yeah.
polypeptides and we look at
Yeah.
neuro connectivities, these are basically peptides that form. I mean, they're basic molecules that chain together, that form this type of reaction by essentially locking into our neurons like a key into a lock.
Yeah,
A-
there's a place for them already there.
And why is that? Why do these have such a profound effect on our psychology, man? Like it can literally transport us to different worlds.
Yeah, I think
Um,
sometimes we need a little transportation to different worlds. And what you just said about you had found some perspective, and that's what I've always liked about psychedelics more than anything, is what you get is an alternate perspective. We get so
mm,
locked into, especially as an adult, the come back to the I already know character, but like to
look what
look at your
happened. Sid Barrett. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
that rings
I'm
a
gonna
bell. But
Google them.
to be able to take an alternate perspective on our own experience, it's not often that we get to step outside of the thing that is me and look at it from a non-judgmental, seemingly non-judgmental, non-biased perspective of it's like you get to step outside of whether you want to call it your ego or your persona, this thing that you've convinced yourself is you. And you can take a step out and you can almost see all the layers and all the experiences that built up
Oh,
to.
Pink Floyd. Sorry,
Okay,
build
yeah,
up to.
yeah, all these little experiences that build up to you, and you can almost go back in and
Mm,
selectively say, "Oh, well, this one's not serving me anymore, or I don't need this, or this is not an ideal situation," and that using them, like I've always been drawn to them for my whole adult life, and I didn't realize it until maybe the last 10 years. Is that I really like to explore the brain, and yes, when I was younger, abusively, arguably, of course, absolutely. I got carried away. I like to escape. But then, once I started to see the meaning and the value of being able to every now and then say, hey, I don't think we're all as certain as we convince ourselves we are all the time. Like or if we are certain, I don't think it necessarily serves us the way that we think that it is. And sometimes you need to take a step back and be like, there's a meme going on. There's a video meme. Are you sure about that? You sure about that? That to have that pressed into you from an alternate perspective. You sure about that? Like sometimes it's nice to have your worldview rocked a little bit and have a potential alternative perspective laid out. Like, you sure you got it all figured out on this one go around, Bill? Like, oh, maybe not.
you sure know
Maybe
you know
not.
about that fish there? You sure you know about that sign? You sure you know about that tree? You sure you know about that rock?
I
Right?
already know. Yeah, I
Right. I
already
already know. Right? Is
know.
that what you were saying earlier?
Seen it. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. Rock. Oh, it's hard. It's gray. Yeah, I know it. Oh, sky, blue. Yeah, I got it. Clouds, fluffy, white. Seen them.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
cares?
Got it. Yeah. Who cares? But
What
when you
else?
see it with different eyes, right? You see it with different
Oh,
eyes, and you see it, and that's where it's like realize. Like
oh
you
my
start
gosh.
to realize through your real eyes of awe and compassion and wonder of the
Woof.
plane that we have incarnated into, right? And sometimes we just get stuck on these. It's like a rat in a race, man. We just get stuck on these wheels and we forget the majesty of life and what we are so fortunate not just to be alive every day, but to be alive at this time
Yeah.
with who we experience life with and the
Yeah.
lessons. And then the other thing that's so
Mm,
profound too, and
mm,
Christopher Upton, who's
mm,
joined us, what's up,
mm,
buddy?
mm,
Christopher's awesome, and he says
mm,
talking about Sid Barrett, which was a Pink Floyd member, psychedelic, a
mm,
rocker. Here, let's do
mm,
a quick rundown on Sid Barrett
mm,
since he was mentioned here. Um, and here's a wiki of him. Is a co-founder of the Pink Floyd in 1965. The original frontman, primary songwriter, became known for his whimsical style of psychedelia and stream of consciousness writing style. And you know, "Shine on You, Crazy Diamond," one of the beautiful songs.
mm, mm,
Shine on you. But the other
mm,
aspect of this, which we need to mention, is like when we look at even Christopher um, Upton here, he used to run a record store, right? And he
mhm,
used to run. I don't know, Chris, if you did a recording booth as well, but then we also look at Rick Rubin, right? And Def Jam Records, Columbia Records.
Mhm.
And I often tell people like art, like the painting and stuff that I have, and this, I have a little miniature thing right here. I don't know, you can't
Mhm.
really see it, but I'm into
Mhm.
miniatures, man.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love miniatures, dude. I just love them. They make me feel like a giant.
Yeah,
But
yeah, sure.
I tell people that art decorates space and music decorates time,
Mm,
right? And there's something that happens
mm,
to us
mhm,
when we're transported by these essentially polyphonic
mhm,
frequencies, right? They're just a
mhm,
vibrational tones that were
mhm,
overlapping with other vibrational tones that are known as instruments,
mhm.
or organs, or different like pipe organs or pianos or something, and it's all these tones
Oof.
together, and you hit a
Mhm.
tone and you know if that tone belongs, or you know if that tone is not, what do they call it when a tone is off, like it's
Dissonant.
dissonant, right?
Mhm,
Or
mhm,
resonant, right?
mhm, mhm.
And you can feel it, like literally you can feel
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah,
and even on these substances, holy smokes, man, that's why I think that music festivals are a very popular venue for people to do
mm,
psychedelics or life change or mind altering substances. But that's one aspect of it, right, where it's the environment is actually entertaining us, and then there's another aspect of this where you go into a dark closet and you go
mhm,
within, right? And so
mhm,
there's an
mhm.
adventure that you can take within you, and then
Yeah,
there's an adventure that is provided for you on the outside too.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's the
yeah,
two vectors, right? Is going away and looking at the world that we have and the experiences that we have. But I think also it's equally important to venture within, to
yeah,
know thyself, right?
yeah,
And know thyself is one of the aspects of this life that is crucial. um, and that's something that can be helped with these substances as well. I gave my dog the rest of my yogurt and she's kicking it
yeah.
all around here, so
Yeah, there is
hold
there's a tighter relationship with the emotional self. Now, granted, I don't know that everyone would have the same experience. It depends on why you're doing it, etc. But especially with psilocybin, there is this attunement with your own felt sense, as well as it does um, um, improve your hearing and makes your vision acuity heightened. And so there is a relationship with psilocybin that I have never experienced like with any other anything on earth, as far as how you get way more deeply rooted into your emotional self. You hear more acutely, you're more understanding of how emotions do what they do. And because sound, it really feels like, as I go deeper and explore more into sound, that sounds can hit a little closer to our felt sense of things than even words can. Words hit this wall, and I'm good with my words and I can explain things well, but there is this point at which they fall a little bit short of what music can do. And I actually think it's Jordan Peterson who said that music is one of the few things that people can't be cynical about. Like, it's unfucking deniable that it does what it does. And it seems that it has been around, just by how it's experienced, that it's been around. It would make sense more than words, because it hits these vibrational tones and frequencies that seem to align more with how we feel than words can ever do. Words are this like simulated version that come right up to it and come real close, but we're just describing felt sense that music seems to be able to access. And that while I might sing and play reasonably a few instruments, as the shirt says, well, I do sound baths, and that's different. That's what you just described about these tones and these frequencies. I'm not trying to make sounds like sounds you've heard before. And I'm not rocking a chord that makes you feel like when you were a kid again. That almost feels like it gets in the way. I'm playing sounds in such a way that they are intended to dive right into your psyche, hang out there, vibrate a little bit, and make you feel some kind of way. It's like it's straight to the point as emotions, not complicated with lyrics and resonant chords and whatnot. Like, and there's a place for that. But what I do is try to make sounds that are intended to whisk you away to a felt sense of being a thing, to take your consciousness and just kind of, instead of like going into a float tank where you're in total darkness, which has its place, but or sitting in silence and you're meditating. I want to take your consciousness in a sound bath. I want to rest it in a bunch of sounds and vibrations and frequencies so that now you don't have to think, but you don't have to actively not think. I'm just gonna carry you in a little boat away, and I'm gonna take control. And I don't mean that in any sort of tyrannical way. And we can bring that back to dogs. That I'm taking control of your thoughts and your feelings for a bit, but I'm gonna need one thing out of you. That's trust.
And
And I have
consent.
you better believe it that's part of the experience. Yeah, that if you're coming in here, there is a surrender to it and a trust that comes along with it, a trust and respect, and certainly a consent too. That if I'm going to provide this experience for you, you have to know damn well I'm not going to do anything irresponsible or inappropriate. And that's what I tell people with dogs, that if I want that dog to know, if I tell you to do it, you're doing it. If I tell you not to, then you're not doing it. And for one reason, that I'm never going to put you in a position that's going to, me telling you to do or not do something is going to put you in fear or danger or a problem for you. That's the kind of trust that I'm looking for, both in the sound world, but also I say it with dogs. Like, you're not tyrannical to tell a dog, this is a hard no, or anything like that, because we're asking these dogs to live in a human world. And if we're expecting them to just figure it out, it's pretty much not going to happen. You got to show them how to do it and not do it. And that's and I'm sure you've had this issue where we try to tell people, like, you're the teacher, you're the guide, you're the leader, you're all these things that represent pinnacle of hierarchy. You want to know what I've found worked the last 6 months better than anything, Bill? You're Batman. That's Robin. Robin's not telling Batman what to do. And that's just how it is, man. And that has landed a little easier than some of the other language that I've used around that hierarchical understanding of relationship, where you're the boss, you're the leader, you're the guide, you're the teacher, you're the mentor, whatever. People are like, oh, I don't know, it feels mean. I'm like, well, you're Batman and that's Robin. How often is Robin being like, hey, Batman, why don't you go handle some shit? Like, no, it doesn't work that way. They're sidekick creatures. Tell them what to do, and they're like,
Yep.
you got it.
Well, and that's where I adopt the term dog coach, right?
Yeah.
It's like a kind of a coach, and every great team needs a coach, and you're like team members, but there's that, I like that Batman and Robin, right? Because
That's what I've been using.
there's value to that, right? And
Yeah.
and then let's see here. Sid was genius, crashed and burned, went too far with drugs. And Aldous Huxley says, once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's another aspect of this, is like, look, we can go too far with this stuff. There is over usages. And if we don't see the value, and if we don't start out with kind of that purpose, and this can become an escape. And with anything, it's integration, but it's also a balance as well, right?
Oh
and it
gosh,
says,
yeah.
I love music in a think tank. I've never done a float tank. I want to do it. I just get heebie-jeebies like from other people like bathing in the water that I'm in, so I got to do my own. I like having my own thing, so I want to build my own float tank out here. But I see the value of that. I'm an avid meditator. And what's crazy, dude, is that I used to meditate when I was 20 years old. I'm 46 now, young man. And now I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe. And the thing that I like about him is that he'll actually guide you through some of these meditations using music, right? And it just puts you in such a profound space. And I actually went down to Cancun to an event with Dr. Joe, and I remember when we went to Dr. Joe's event, he's like, welcome to the monastery, right? And the very first meditation that he did, and what I did with him, was so profound, man. Because I just recently lost my mother. She passed away, and God bless her and God rest her soul. And one of the most profound moments of my life, and my father as well is gone. And it's also, it's just taught me about my own mortality, and that I'm kind of next in line here naturally, right? To do that dance of passing away and leaving my earthly body here. But we also have to realize that there's non-attachment. Like, even my body, I'm going to leave here. All this stuff is not coming with me.
Yeah.
And so where I do live and where I will be once I'm gone from here, and this stuff will still remain, will be in the memories of my friends, and well, the influence that I had on their life will be kind of the wake of my life will be lapping up on their shores,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Have
And
you
my
heard that saying that we actually die two deaths? One time when we pass away, and
physically
the second
die
time
when the
when the last
memory of
yeah, when the last person utters our name for the last time. I'm like, oh,
where I
oof.
don't where I think that there is no such thing as death ultimately, right?
Yeah,
When we
sure.
start to look at that, and I mean it's pretty out there, but I think that we are having an experience. I'm having an experience in this body
Yeah,
as Bill, and you are having the
yeah,
experience as Noah. But
yeah,
ultimately, when we break it down, we're infinite love and energy, and choosing to incarnate in these water suits on this plane of existence so that we can experience life, chart lessons that we've learned, or that and when we're continuing to learn.
yeah,
Um, and then also, the Western society has a very big, wretched fear of death.
yeah. It's
And
a bad relationship. It's a gap in understanding. Yeah,
yes, where it's the other side of the coin, in my opinion,
yeah,
right? And we get to have a profound position here where we can counsel people with death and dying
yeah.
with these dogs that don't live as long as us,
Oh my
right?
gosh, yeah, 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 yeah. It's almost like in my younger years, and a little cynically, I would call them just like a counting down sadness machines. Like you get this dog, you're like, well, so now what? Now I'm 15. Now I'm 15 years away from just devastating heartbreak. Why even bother? I'm like, yeah, well, at the end of Burning Man, you burn it all down, man. It doesn't mean that you don't maximize and have an obligation and a responsibility to maximize the experience while you're there, and that in the end it doesn't mean you're not sad, it doesn't mean it doesn't break your heart, but that now you get an opportunity to think about what that experience provided for you, and then try again when you're ready, if you're ready.
Well, and when that experience is over, then we can view it as a whole instead of a conscious part of preference that our mind picks out that we like more. We can actually look at it as
Mm,
a
mm,
whole experience, right? And look
mm,
at it for what it really was. And that's what I tell people,
yeah,
like, and not only that, but I learned this from Brene Brown, The Power of
yeah, yeah,
Vulnerability,
yeah,
where if we practice trauma, it
yeah,
doesn't help when the trauma actually occurs. And so
yeah,
why be the sadness machine, man? Like knock it off.
dude,
It's going to be, we'll have plenty of time to mourn when the dog's actually gone. And that's where people are
yeah,
like, I'm like, they're so sad. It just makes me so sad. I'm like, well, the dog's right there, man. Like, why
yeah,
don't you love him
just
up?
be
He's right.
present with it,
He's right
yeah,
there.
do it, yeah,
He's right there, right? And
yeah,
especially when we hear about like if a dog has given a terminal diagnosis, or if we've been given a terminal diagnosis, it's profound to practice that that gratitude, man,
oh,
and it becomes a form of an attachment, right? Where we
yeah,
kind of look and that's where Epictetus from the Stoics and Marcus
yeah,
Aurelius, and that's where these Stoics kind of have a value in their philosophy, I believe, of like not looking at what is gone, but looking what still remains,
sure,
and also being thankful for that. And I'm like, the dog's right there. The dog's here. Dog's not
yeah,
gone.
yeah,
Why are we practicing this trauma response
mm,
when the dog is
mm,
right next to you? And I think that is like living in the future, like projecting ourselves, and I get it, man. Like my dogs are mean the world to me, and my boy Cedar, and every time
yeah, yeah,
that I have and one of my clients was laughing at me, especially towards that end of life. I'm like, look, I say to them, this experience with you has been very profound, and I love you to a depth that I can't put into words. And if you consent, and when I'm done with this physical body and I lay my earthly body on this plane and leave it, I would love to intertwine with you forever. Like
yeah,
that's the profound love that I have for these dogs. Is like,
yeah,
look, I if and of course it's up to them, and I respect
yeah,
their decision either way. But that's where I want to be, man. It's like let's join, let's be together forever after this life. Like I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying I'll
Mm,
see you later. And not only that, but we already have entangled throughout my memories.
mm,
And like, I will never, ever forget the experiences that I've had with these dogs,
mm.
and the different stations of my life that I did experience these dogs, right? And
Yeah,
what I've learned from them and what I've carried forward from the lessons
yeah,
that these guys have taught me, and it's so profound, man. But losing them is something that is probably one of the most challenging aspects of
yeah,
dog, being stewards of these animals. And it sucks, dude. I tell people it
yeah,
sucks so bad, but it's worth it.
yeah.
It's worth it
Well,
because we get
they are,
another dog a lot of
yeah,
times too,
and
and
they are some of our greatest teachers. And it's so funny that phrases like that get thrown around so frequently. They start to lose their resonance and become cliche. But like the experience of that, especially when you work with them and you have that outlier dog, or you have this dog that brings about the very frustration that you tell your customers is not a useful emotion to have with these dogs, that they constantly, and especially working with dogs our own personal dogs, you see how the complexity of the personal relationship heightens the emotional response to it. And that we have, yeah, this I when my oldest dog Beans, when he was a puppy, he was so food driven. I used to call him my little stinky Buddha, because there was two separate times when he ate my lunch or my dinner, and he was just a puppy, he didn't know any better. But like, I had worked 10 hours straight, I hadn't eaten anything, I was so exhausted, and this guy
he's
found
like,
his way into
thank you.
my foot long sandwich, both in that creating a reward that we're going to have to address at some point, that you can't just go around stealing my sandwich. But like, I needed that right then. I was so hungry. And then not only can I not be upset with him because it doesn't help, but I have to now care for him because he's going to have diarrhea for days on end, or I can induce vomiting. And now I have to care for this thing that stole my lunch. Bless his heart, he doesn't know that it's that. And I had this obligation to be like, well, I know all the rules, but damn it if I'm not furious for a moment. But that doesn't, it doesn't help anything to be that. And so yeah, I called it, because I stinky Buddha, because after he stole my thing and I had to care for him, well, now I got to clean up his diarrhea for days on end. And yeah, I could see how it
Welcome
was
to
partly
dog
my,
ownership.
sure, and I could say a big part of that was my fault and my responsibility. And you know what he was doing? Being a dog. And so, yeah, they were, God, they're such incredible teachers in this joint evolved partnership of human and dog, man. It's such a beautiful and challenging responsibility to do them right. And such a person. That's one of the first things I talk about, why I do a free consultation first. I'm like, this is really personal, man. You cannot throw money at this problem and make it go away. Although it's a part of it, that there's nothing that you can do for this dog that I'm going to do for you, unless you're just talking about me sharing some information that it is your responsibility to play out. They don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to do things different. They behave in that way because you let it happen. And if
Mhm.
you want to change it, they can change in direct proportion and exact relative proportion to the degree to which you change. But you have to take it bit by bit. That dog with me tomorrow can be a whole new dog, aside from some habits that I can address as they happen. But you and that dog, well, that's one thing that the Dog Whisperer show fell short on. He didn't really remind people that this is going to be a year to 3 years of
Mm.
addressing these situations as they come up, because you're learning too.
Mm.
Yeah, it's wild, man.
Well, and that's a culmination of their experiences with you,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yep.
almost like wiping the slate clean when they come to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, they still have those experiences. It's just that it's not with me,
Yeah.
and so it's a little
New
different.
guy and new environment, and you get new behaviors, but same person that they've been taking advantage of for 6 years. Come on, you like, you start to put your foot down one day, and they're like,
They're like, this guy here. Can you believe this guy?
"Yeah,
He's
this
trying to
guy's
tell me what to
hilarious."
do. Watch this. And they're like, oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
And he's like,
yeah. There you
sucker.
go.
That's what I
Yep,
call it. Like, you're a
I
sucker to
knew
your
it.
dog, man. Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what. But the thing is that we think that we're doing them right, but by providing that boundary,
Yeah.
we're actually really doing them right, because now they know where the boundaries are. They have a great
Yeah.
understanding of the kind of the lay of the land and what's
Yeah.
expected. And it is, we're not going living in a den and
Mm.
it's like computer. Yeah, totally. It's like cleaning up a computer and making some more space for learning. Right? It's like, no, we're not going to have all this fluff in here, right? We're going to stick with what the essentials are, right?
Mm.
And then we're going to take our relationship to that next level. And that's the importance of having a professional, man. It's the importance of hiring
Yeah.
somebody that knows and does what I do every single day. And it's also, it's accountability, it's a schedule, it's
Oh
knowledge,
man,
it's the
those
why behind
routines. Yeah.
everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then just a proper understanding of not just the dog element. And like I was saying, we're not going in the den and living with the dogs. The dogs are coming in the human world, and it's our obligation to show them, hey, look, man, that thing is not a monster, that's a bus. And even though it's not a monster, it still could cause a lot of harm. We need to be aware of that. All right. Or I mean, just these different things, like a air compressor, my dog was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
whoa. And I'm just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, dude, this is just an air compressor, something that we
Yeah. Yeah.
use. Right.
Yeah.
And then being present enough to know and to witness that dog's reaction, and knowing what to do to either to mitigate that response, or to soften it with that dog, or
Yeah.
to harden it a little bit too with
Yeah,
someone.
I always give them the chance to explore. That's what they would do on their own. If something scared you, then I'm about to take a step back and be like, "Go check it out for yourself." Like the Great Dane. There was a classic Caesar dog whisperer episode where a Great Dane slipped on a slippery floor, and the owner dealt with it by going, "Oh my God!" And that dog never ever was willing to go on that floor again. When if they did that out in the real world, they would just be like, they would look around at it, they would give it a smell, they might check their footing again, 1 foot, 2 foot, that's not that big a deal, and they walk away. But you
Yes.
add a human level of negative emotion to it, and that's it sounds brutal to say it, but you created a traumatic experience for your dog that there will be no coming back from because until you change, but that you chose to share trauma with that dog in a situation where they would have just sniffed it, checked it out, hell, peed on it, and moseyed on. And yeah, people really do not understand that kind of influence, that emotional influence that they have over their dog having a negative experience. It's really tough to get that across because, like we started, they want to nurture, they want to coddle, they want to do things that for a human might be the right move sometimes, but for a dog, and like I tell people all the time, if you are not sure what to do nothing, because there's 2 or 3 right things to do, and there's an infinity of wrong decisions to make here. Don't confuse the dog. Just step away.
Observe.
Oh my gosh, such a great tool. Such a
Just
great tool.
observe. And I tell people from a 30,000-foot view, right? And I had a lady of mine who's like, I don't get that. What do you mean by that? And I was like, well, let me tell you what I mean. You ever take a plane flight?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah. I was like, so just put yourself in the plane looking out the window, and then just imagine you see a house on fire from the plane. There's nothing you can do about it.
I like that one. I tell
Except
people
for,
watch their dogs like it's a nature documentary. You're Richard Attenborough, or no, not
okay.
even narrating. You're just watching, like, especially because my specialty outside of walking was socializing, and I have we're talking dogs that don't know each other in an environment where people don't really know when to intervene. And so I'm not saying that from a socializing standpoint, but watch your one dog or your 2 dogs. Just watch what they do, not with the preconception of knowing. Watch the choices that they make, watch what they move towards, watch what they avoid, watch what they like and dislike. That is going to be your greatest teacher, because if you already know, because how often are people narrating what their dog is doing? Oh, it's thinking this and it's doing this. I'm like, I speak dog. It's doing none of those things. Just watch it. Presume you don't know. Watch the decisions that it makes and be like, maybe I don't know as much about my dog as I thought. And that's a great starting point. for sure.
Do you know about what's his name? Oh, the sportscaster.
Marv Albert.
No, Andrew Cotter. Andrew
Oh,
Cotter.
no.
Okay, so my clients just introduced me to this guy, Andrew Cotter, and I think he's got a book, so I want to definitely plug his book here. I know he's got a book here. Let me go to Amazon. But so Andrew Cotter, and we're going to watch one of these here that he does.
Great.
But he was a sportscaster, and during the COVID, no sports. And so guess what? He started sportscasting his dogs.
Get out of here. What
Dude,
a
you got to see
great
this.
idea.
You got to
took
see
it
this.
From me.
Yeah. So let me post up one of his books, you guys. And this is what my clients introduced me to this gentleman, and I am hooked. You guys, let's watch one of his.
That idea.
Let's watch one of his sportscasts if I can find a good one here. I know that there's a good one.
I am both impressed and envious of his creative decision.
Yeah, dude, it's good. Like, it's really good. Okay, so let me show you. We're going to watch one of these, and this one's called The Game of Bones, Episode 2, okay? And let's watch this. Okay, but hold on. I'm going to put this in a way that, here, let me see, theater mode. I want to make sure that I can share this, and I have to switch my speakers here. So, now, ready? Share screen. Olive and Mabel here.
Okay.
This is here. Okay, let me make sure this is up, and then listen.
So into the final minute, and Olive in possession, but this is where Mabel is strong, chasing the game, using that intensity. We saw it in the semi-final, staring at the fourth rabbit for over 7.5 minutes. And perhaps a few signs of overconfidence from her rival, a bit of shoulder. Careful. Here's the change from the classic hold, still placed on the outside, though great technique. At a glance at the youngster, who shows little emotion, but her mind will be empty. 20 seconds to go now. Olive closing in on victory and that coveted prize. Being told she's a very good dog. One paw to control and a switch. Chance, still waiting. Still believing. And you wonder what Olive is doing here. Only has to hold on. Going to the upright, though. High tariff with no opposable thumbs. High risk at this stage. No mercy from the younger dog, who takes this victory just as time runs out. A famous win built on patience and sheer belief. For Olive, only thoughts of what might have been, but only herself to blame. She's given this one away, and that will hurt most of all. Bad dog.
Get out of here. How did that exceed my expectations by that much?
That's just one, dude. That's just one. There's one where they're in the pond, right? And here, let me switch the sound here, so you can come through that way.
That was impeccable.
There you go. So you guys check him out. Here, I'll post up a link to that exact video that we just watched.
That was just 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10, man. But you can just tell, because I even tried that, like, and it's hard because this is what he does, right? Is for a living.
But is this that's happening live? That's happening he's saying it while that's happening. That's not like added later, because his timing was impeccable. I expected him to be a little ignorant about dog stuff, and it was like general but spot on. Oh man!
So take that as
that was great.
Something, to view it and just be like, but it's also I don't know, that's that observer, right? Let them do. And then also we observe certain things, like Mabel is just staring at him, right? I went out there, man,
so intently.
I had a deer and a cow, and the cow was on the other side of the fence, and the deer was right here, and they sat and stood and stared at each other for 15 minutes, didn't budge. Trying to figure each other out. Yeah, exactly. But that's what made me think of, man, when you said that. It's like be like a nature like Attenborough, right? David Attenborough. But or be a sportscaster, right? Or just the lesson here is observe without reaction. I mean, that's a little bit reaction. But I love it, man. And the dog goes into every corner of the human existence.
Gosh,
You know,
yeah.
that's how I'm so fortunate that I do what I do. But I've met so many wonderful people, from hip hop artists to architects to
Mm-hmm.
chefs
Mm-hmm.
to, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you name it, you know, and
Yeah.
it's been something that has been so wonderful. But it's also, I mean, and we're going to be talking about this with another person we've been already discussing about, like, the spiritual connection that dogs have, and that we wouldn't be where we are as a civilization without the help of our furry friends. And it's also
No.
because of, I think that started even with livestock guardians, and that's where I'm big into livestock guardians, because it took us from a nomadic existence to a horticultural pastoral where we can manage
Yeah.
multiple livestock.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
and as Maple sees the cat walk across the yard, she stares intently with a
Yeah.
low growl,
Yeah.
and she's focused as the cat is moving very purposefully. You guys don't see what I'm looking at, but
Yeah.
my dog's right below me
The
with the
cat,
cat.
knowing that she's out of reach, could never be reached by the dog, and looks back as smugly as you'd expect a cat to look back.
Yep. And then a little bit of boastfulness on the cat's part, but oh no, indeed, the cat is safe. Right. But have fun with this, man. Like, a lot of times too, we're coming into situations that, you know, the dog has bitten somebody, the people, like I was saying about Winston, man, I didn't realize it, but they were going to euthanize this dog, right? And so, you know, a lot of this stuff, it has a degree of seriousness that I think can use a lightheartedness or some fun. I mean, some of this stuff is serious when we have serious breeds and serious problems, but even then, you know, we have aspects of this relationship that are fun, and that can be viewed at as a little bit lighthearted. And, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, that moment there, but with our help, we can get to another place of acceptance and understanding. And that's where we are as professionals, and that's what the duty that we provide these people that hire us is, those answers that are going to bring about a change in their life that is going to dramatically improve not just their lives, but the lives of the dog as well.
Yeah. So, and to bring back what we were just talking about with the livestock guardian dogs, and what you're saying, right? Like, they've co-evolved with us. No other creature has that intertwining. You could argue a horse does, but from a prey animal standpoint, it's a little bit different. But that they've co-evolved with us, so there's no way that we can address what's going on with the dog without also addressing what's going on with us, because they're honestly, they're damn near one and the same. That there are issues that play out with dogs that, like, I could watch a dog's behavior, and it's like I could tell you what's going on in their household day to day, as far as how that person is interacting with their dog, just by, like, there's times when, like, a dog comes over to my house because I'm getting an assessment of a dog for the first time, and I can tell day one, not once in that dog's life has it ever been told no in a way that it believed it. Like, I can tell that the moment a dog gets there, like, I will disagree with a dog in something that it's doing, and it will not even realize that that is a possibility in life. And we understand that with children, but people don't understand the way that they're failing their dogs from the standpoint of making sure they have a certain skill set that makes it easier for them to address. That if like, people ask me, well, what would I do in this situation? I'm like, there is a lack of foundation that I don't even have a good answer for you now until I get to know you and the dog a little bit better, because there's just so many things lacking from this relationship that right now you're just gonna have to take it for what it is, and we'll dig in a little bit deeper, and I'll let you know what you can do to chip away. But the relationship is in such imbalance that I kind of need to have more information before I can give you a valid assessment.
Right, and time too, to make sure that this is proper, what I expect, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, it's a disconnect. The dog believes the affection, but doesn't believe the discipline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so and that's where I tell, like, especially my ladies, I'm like, that dog has to be your discipline has to be as believable as your affection.
Ooh,
And
can
they're
I
just like,
jump in on
whoa.
that? Yeah, right there. So
Yeah, go
of
ahead.
that, This is, I want to say, a Lynn Boki quote. If you can't say no, then you have no business saying yes. And I'm like,
Ooh.
wow. I mean, yeah. And that on its surface, like if you don't let it kind of sit with you right there, it can be like, yeah, I get it. It's like, no, let that just rattle around with you a little bit. That if you, yeah, if you can't say no, then you have no business saying yes. Because if you watch and observe dogs, really never are they coming around to give each other an attaboy, you did a good job. There is a presumption of everything is okay when nobody is being told no. And how they learn from each other, everything is fine until it isn't. So if I'm allowing it, then it's the same as encouraging it. If I allow it, it's okay. As soon as you do something that, or as soon as a dog does to another dog, something that is not allowed in that dog's world, then what you see is disagreement. And no, it's conflict, it's a growl, it's a lip lick, it's a hard stare, whatever it is. They do things through disagreement. That if you're doing something again and they are tolerating it, then in their mind it's allowed. But how they learn from each other is that as soon as you step over the line, they let you know immediately, and then you comply. And they don't sit back and say, "Yeah, that's what I thought. I told you." Like, no, they don't need to stick it to you. They change the behavior, dog simmers down, and they move on and they don't hold a grudge. But being willing to disagree with your dog and do it in a way that makes sense to them, that comes right back to that is your discipline as effective as your affection. It's like
Yes.
almost never.
When you say no, your yes means nothing. When you never say no, your yes means nothing is another way to put that.
Yeah, that there has
Right?
to be some contrast in that it makes even affection, it makes it more meaningful when it's given out sparingly or when it makes sense than it is to just dote on your dog all the time. Because when you want to use affection as a reward, but it's something that they just get all the time, it makes it less relevant, it makes it less meaningful. That creating that desire for it and the meaning for it and the sensible understanding of when it's employed and why, then it gives the dogs something to want and work for. And then that over affection, as you've seen, creates that codependency, creates that separation anxiety, creates the not knowing how to exist unless they're leaning on their owner's leg. Get right on out of here with that.
Yeah. Well, do
Yeah.
you know what? I want to actually put a pin in this, okay? Because
Yeah.
I want to continue this conversation on Patreon, and I want to start with this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to start with this, and I actually have some stuff that I'm going to be showing about when you never say no, your yes is meaningless. But before we go over to Patreon and finish our conversation,
Yeah.
let's tell the people how they get a hold of you, man, and if they want to
Cool.
do a sound bath or something, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what do you,
So I'm out in Austin, Texas. I work at a place that's where I'm at right now called Squatch Frontier Fitness. And so, I mean, for people that are out here, you're welcome to come in. As far as social media goes, long story short, I went through a very large evolution in my life and I reduced everything. And so I really only have an Instagram, and it's Urbeezy, URBEEZY, or you can find me as Noah Joseph. It'll go to the same place, but Instagram is what I use primarily. Again, work at Squatch Frontier Fitness, but if you were to track me down on Instagram, it's Urbeezy, URBEEZY. And I mean, if I haven't made it obvious, I'm a pretty easy guy to get along with and open, and we'll chat with anybody about anything. And so, yeah, you're welcome to track me down there. But if you're in Austin and you want to come to this gym, it's a really unique spot and a really cool spot. So yeah, that's about
I'm
it for
going
me.
to that gym when I come in there, man.
That's really cool. Got sauna, cold plunge, big gym. We have a podcast studio where I was just in two days ago, like a full-on 3-camera, 2-microphone professional podcast studio
Very
available to
cool.
rent anytime. Many cold plunges. I do sound baths here also. But yeah, if anybody wants to talk anything more about anything what we've talked about, I am an open book. Easy conversations or difficult ones, I try to be available for that.
Well, I appreciate you, man, and we're going to continue this conversation on Patreon. I put up a link to my Patreon. One question before you go, Noah,
yeah.
on music. Go ahead,
Please.
Christopher. And then
Please.
check out my Patreon if you guys want to support me there. I have a lot of content that I'm building, and we're going to be having some exclusive content as well. and I have some stuff that I'm going to be talking with Noah about. That's I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm
so
excited
join us
too,
over
man.
there. And then here's the question: who was the only artist to have 3 hits in one day?
Oh God, I'm torn between wanting to answer that literally, and then it's set up a little bit like a dad joke. Who's the only artist to have 3 hits in one day? It sounds like me hitting you and you hitting the floor, sort of a thing. But I'm gonna go with literal, and I'm gonna go with one of the most important artists of my upbringing. And I'm gonna go with Michael Jackson. Feeling like that couldn't possibly be right, but.
What do we got, Christopher?
Yeah.
Christopher, just so you know, Christopher's a little joker too. Like,
oh well, if you would have set me up like that, then I would have felt like it was
John
Damn
Lennon,
it!
2 in the body and 1
I
in
was
the.
gonna say the
Oh
Beatles.
my
You son of a snake! I was gonna say something Beatles related, and you merged it all together.
Christopher.
Yeah.
Awesome,
Halfway
man.
saw it coming, but not. I like the misdirection.
I should have warned you about him first. Well, thank you, everybody, and stay there, Noah. We're going to be over on Patreon, and I'm going to say bye to you. But we'll say everybody to everybody here.
Yeah.
See you all over at Patreon, you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you for being here, Christopher.
Thanks, man.
We'll see you.